And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 120. Apologies there about the sort of a slight mess up at the beginning. What else is new? Today we're going to be talking about, for want of a better phrase, the bride. Where are we? Let's just show you this. The photo shoot I did with Circle Vintage called, I've put together the phrase, the bath, the bride and the spaceman, but I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go. Also, we've got critique. We've had 4 people send in images looking for feedback. So Viji has been playing around with peacock feathers and is wanting to get a bit of an idea of how to sort of get up close, do a bit more in the way of macro and play with these, but without actually having a macro lens. What can you do? Russ has returned to this photo, which we actually looked at a little over a year ago, I think. We talked about the gap between the horse and the dog, and other ways you could maybe kind of reframe the image. So we're going to be readdressing that and looking at another version of this that he sent in. No, not that one. Let's go that one. Yes. Roy has not Roy, sorry, John has also sent this one in. Is looking for a bit of feedback on how he might have gone about this one differently. And Mai-Britt in Denmark has sent in this one as well and is looking for a bit of feedback on getting the story and ways that maybe it could have been cropped in any different ways. So that's kind of what we're going to be chatting about today. In the meantime, here we are live on YouTube. If you would like to leave a comment, let me know you're here. Let me know where you're coming in from, what the weather's like. Just say hello. Then that would be lovely. Right, so here we are. Yes, I can see we've got a few people in already, so I'll just check the comments. Oh, Robert's here, says, howdy all from Texas. Roy says, hello everyone from a warm and sunny West Yorkshire. Mai-Britt says, hello from Copenhagen, where we have a local cloudburst and thunder. Ooh, quite exciting. April says, hello everyone from a cloudy, sun trying to come out to Long Island, New York. Maggie says, pleasantly warm in Castle Douglas this afternoon. And it is indeed. Look out the window. We had a kind of nice burst of summer before. Then there was a sort of definite sort of sense of almost autumn in the air, but it looks like we're having just a wee reprise of summer, which is always quite nice up here in Scotland. Viji says good evening from India. Meg says hello everyone. John says good day from Columbus, Ohio. Pat says hi all, late from Somerset, fell asleep. You're not too late, Pat. We only just started. Oh, and here we go. Andros Game Dev. Not sure. Yeah, give me a name that looks like a combination of something. So let me know what name to call you by. That would be great. Says anyway. He says hello from Germany. Have a nice day. Welcome. Glad you could make it along. Right. And April saying welcome to Andros too. Okay, so. Like I say, what we're going to be talking about today is the shoot I did with Circle Vintage. So those of you who were tuned in a few weeks ago might remember the car shoot that I did, where we had 2 models. We had a vintage car. I was playing around with lights, and that was all part of a couple of collaborations that I did with Circle Vintage. And now Circle Vintage are a vintage clothes store based in Dumfries. And they're a really fun, fun couple. It's Marie and Dan who run it, and they're great to team up with, to do collaborations with. So Marie's got a fantastic sense of styling as well, and then access to models and what have you. And while we were looking around for ideas, we were chatting about it, and then she turned around and said, she said, have you seen Fiona's bathroom? And I thought, no, I knew which Fiona she meant, but I had no idea. So she sent me over a couple of photos she'd taken on her phone, and lo and behold, yes, Fiona does have this rather amazing bathroom where she's got a bath in the middle of the floor, and it sort of reminds me of adverts and stuff from the 1970s and Cadbury's Flake. I dare say very few of you will get that reference. However, it didn't matter. The fact was that this was a bathroom quite fancy by certainly my standards and Marie's standards, and we thought, well, okay, this sounds like a fun place to do a photo shoot. We bounced around a few more ideas, and Marie had this idea of that maybe we could have somebody. She had this kind of white lace dress, kind of like a wedding dress kind of feel to it. But she also liked the idea of bringing in this kind of retro, almost sort of 60s, 70s Spaceman type vibe to it. So we called on Joseph, who we also used back in the redress fashion show shoot that I did back in November, end of October, beginning of November, which some of you may remember. And so he was kitted out in this sort of gold top and patenty gold leggings, and then these fantastic, brilliant sort of platform gold boots. And then he wanted to get a helmet to kind of get a Spaceman vibe. Managed to get hold of a motorbike helmet, which Daniel's sprayed gold and silver across the visor and everything else. So this was what I was given. So this is one of those places where I found myself talking more recently about where I've discovered a chunk of my creativity comes is less in the idea of pre-visualizing everything I'm going to shoot. I'm not really very good at that, to be honest, but I have kind of half ideas, semi-blurred ideas, something to make a start with. But mostly what happens is my creativity comes out of the ingredients I'm given. So I'll turn up to a shoot, I have a location, I might have models, outfits, props, and then I've got lighting and equipment, and now with these ingredients I have to make something happen. So the creativity is coming, how can I arrange all these things? And it's a lot like I've made reference to a few people. There's a daytime television series on UK TV called Ready Steady Cook, where participants turn up with a bag full of ingredients and they're given to a chef who then has to make a 3-course meal out of the ingredients. And so the creativity of coming up with an idea on the spot with limited amount of ingredients, there's a lot of pressure on that, but that's also where the brain is shooting on all cylinders, and it can be really exciting. Quite a sense of jeopardy as well, because of course it can all go wildly wrong, but it can also be really exciting. So it's rather like that on photo shoots. When I turn up to a photo shoot, I have a bunch of ingredients, and then I have to create something out of it. If I don't, we all go away empty-handed. And it doesn't matter how many, we could have hairdressers, makeup artists, models, stylists. People could have hired us or lent us the location. But nobody's going to have access to anything if I don't actually deliver with the photos. So there's a lot of pressure on it, but I found that I tend to thrive in this situation. So this was what we ended up with. So to give you what I'm going to do, take you through the photos. I'll just pause for a moment and say, just so I can see a couple more. Oh, Nick Bath is here and says hello all. And Rosemary says, good morning. Sorry to sign in a bit late. Lovely morning here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm glad you could both make it along. Right, so what I want to do now then is I'm going to show you some of these photos and talk you through. So I'll show you I'll show you behind the scenes photo first, actually. This was, so we had, this one's Chelsea, our wonderful model Chelsea, wearing this fantastic white lace dress. And now the other thing I will say that what the lens that I decided to use on my camera, I deliberately chose to use a wide angle lens, because whilst this bathroom feels nice and airy with bath in the middle and what have you, the reality is it's still a relatively small room. And I wanted to fit quite a lot into. I wasn't just doing head and shoulders shots, I was wanting to get a chunk of the room into quite a few of the photos. So a wide angle lens was necessary, but there was more to it than just fitting it in. The thing with the wide angle lens is that it distorts. Things get stretched, and it can give this really kind of weird, slightly off-kilter kind of feel, and that's what we were going for. This was, whereas the car shoot we did I was talking about a few weeks ago, we were going for a very cinematic look. This wanted to have that kind of almost falling down the rabbit hole, to use a Alice in Wonderland reference. This sort of sense of not quite right. So here's a little bit of fun with Chelsea standing in the bath, and just to show you here that I've got my large octagon softbox here with a grid over it, which is helping to direct the light. And then watch, some of you might note over in the corner, not firing on this occasion, I've got a little off-camera flash just sitting on the bench over here. So I'm going to come back to that then, because this was then essentially one of the first setups I had. And so what we had here was we had a mix of slightly different agendas, in the fact that, well, Circle Vintage had a couple of shots that they fairly clear shots that they had in mind, ones that they wanted, and then there was other ones that there was one in particular that I wanted to go for, a kind of idea that I had beforehand, and then there were some which were more opportunist, if you like. So to give you a sense, before, so first of all, here we wanted one of our two models. So we've got Joe and we've got Chelsea here, and we play again. So we've got the wide angle lens which is creating, you can see just how much it distorts here. So like Joseph's boot seems, the legs kind of come out forever. The legs become really elongated and stretched. We played around with a few different poses, and actually once Chelsea's kind of crossed her leg over Joe's, then we kind of really felt that we had something. So with this one here, I've got the large softbox just up and to the right. Then so yeah, I'll show you the next, before we actually put any water in the bath, what I wanted to do was, this was the shot that I was after, and this is, I'm particularly pleased with the way this one turned out. Now, so what I wanted to have Joe sitting in the bath, looking over the shoulder at Chelsea sitting here reading a book. And you can see here with the wide angle lens how everything's become distorted out, how there's virtually no, there's our vertical line is at the back here, with being sort of anchored by this candlestick and the centre of the wall. But the further you go to the right, the more the lines lean over, and the further to the left, the more the lines, the verticals become diagonal. Here you can see the helmet that was painted up, and that off-camera flash that you might have seen sitting on. Oh no, sorry, not that one. Where are we? I'll come back to that. Not that one either. Where have we gone? Yes, the off-camera flash that was sitting over here. In this case, I'd taken it and I placed it down on the ground behind the bath. I did try a shot where it was up directly behind Chelsea's head, but it didn't really work. Everything kind of lit. But once I put it onto the ground, it kind of became a bit interesting. There's a fireplace here. It's not a used fireplace. It's just used for decoration. I did consider at one point the idea of putting an orange gel on the off-camera flash in the fireplace, which I've done this kind of trick before to make it feel like it was an actual fire. But in this point, that would have changed the whole colour scheme. With the gold of Joe's outfit and what have you, the colour shift wouldn't have been what I was after. I kind of preferred this sort of blue, silver, gold kind of colour palette. So that was part of the decision making behind that. So with this one here, Joe leaning over Chelsea's shoulder, and it just has this kind of whole slightly weird off-center, what on earth is going on? And because of that, you kind of find yourself, you can't help but kind of keep looking at it. And that's a really key aspect to photography, especially in this day and age where most people are consuming their photography on devices, you're on Instagram or Facebook, and they're skimming through their phone or their tablet at high speed. Then to try and get somebody to linger on a photo for more than half a second, if you can do that, then you're ahead of the game. And if you can get them to sort of spend a little bit longer, maybe click like or comment or holy of holies, share, then you are ahead of 99.9% of photos that are being put up there. But this had kind of everything that I really wanted out of the photo. Now, going on to the next photos, the photos that Circle Vintage particularly had a desire to do was they had wanted one to have. We talked about the idea of having Chelsea sitting in a bath. So I will say it was warm water, not hot water, not cold water, but warm, pleasantly warm water in the bath. And here we go. This is Chelsea getting. She's now sat down in the bath. She's got a glass of wine. We've got a few flowers, just sort of scattering about in the bath. And now I've gone and stood at the far end of the bath, and the lighting. So, as you would have, if we go back to this one here, so we've got this big key light up here. Now, having the flash over there didn't work for this shot because obviously it would have been completely in, but I still wanted some kind of backlight. I did try one having it sitting down on the floor behind the bath. That didn't really work very well. The bottom part of the wall kind of became too bright. So what actually in the end happened was Dan stood outside the door, and then he's holding the flash and it's coming in, and that's lighting up the side of her head, the side of her arm, giving us that little bit of kind of backside light, adding a little bit of extra texture. It kind of feels like it's maybe could be just a light out in the hallway on its own. You don't necessarily have to feel that it's an off-camera flash, but it adds that extra layer of depth to the whole kind of mood of it. Now, to show you a sort of comparison shot here, so the next idea was once we had her Chelsea in the bath, was we wanted to have Joe in his kind of spaceman outfit standing as a kind of looming presence standing behind her. And so we have this one. Now this is where you really see the difference with the wide angle lens. When I've got this turned in portrait fashion, how the picture behind seems to be sort of growing up and sort of spreading out, and Chelsea's legs then seem to go on forever. Now it has to be said, Chelsea is quite tall, but you know, by comparison, not that tall. So if you just kind of compare that with that, you kind of see just how much the distortion can come in. This is the difference between being landscape and being portrait. So what we also did then was we then got Chelsea to sort of dip down into the water and get her hair wet as well. And then this was another version of the photo. So now we're back to the idea of doing a landscape version, only now Chelsea's hair is all wet. We get more of a sense of the environment. We're going for this idea with, you know, the bath absolutely in the center of the picture, kind of steering, sort of taking all our attention down to where we've got Joe and Chelsea. We've got the lovely light coming in from the side, highlighting the edging, creating little bits of shadow over here. So really quite a powerful photo. Another version of this one was actually, yeah, Dan said that he always fancied the idea of he wanted to have a shot with it where he was in kind of looking slightly menacing. So he did this one as well for him, which he kind of feels will probably be his album cover if he ever gets around to making one. So that was a kind of fun extra one to do as well. Then we had, yes, so the other shot we wanted to do was to shoot from the other angle, where they had the idea of Chelsea lying in the bath, but Joe sitting further back. And in that case, what happened was, so this was it. So this here, well, here you can now see the fireplace that I was talking about, which is, you know, used more ornamentally. You also get a better sense of the kind of the bath in the middle of the room. So now we've got sort of Chelsea sitting in the bath, and we've got Joe behind. You can also see out the window bits of Dumfries there as well. And then I did a close-up version of that as well, where I came in really close again, got the camera out wide to create this kind of mood and feeling. So this was all a lot of fun. And then finally what we decided to do was we thought we'd have a go at Chelsea actually lying down flat in the bath in that kind of pre-Raphaelite style of painting, where she's just sort of lying with the flowers floating around her, and then her hair's kind of coming out. Now I did try some because I've got that large softbox up to the left. I did try shooting some straight down, but actually what happened was that gridded softbox actually just ended up reflecting in the water too much, and I couldn't get that direct one. But I did like coming down and getting this sort of this angle and these kind of this, so you've got this sort of strong diagonal lines running across the picture with this. And then I did another shot where with Chelsea then just kind of leaning out, arms across the bath as well. So we got quite a few different styles and moods of shot out of this, all of them kind of using that wide angle lens in this space, most of them using just the two lights. This one might have even just been one light for that matter. No, probably, no, it is the two. I think we've got the flash, but I think at this point I've turned to bounce into the corner to light her up on this side, and I've got the large softbox moved round on the left hand side. A couple more behind the scenes shots. If we go back to here, so like I say, this is one where you got to get a sense of the whole lot. And then here's one where you can see Marie is taking a photo of Chelsea in the bath. Here you can see this is where I've moved the softbox over onto the right side with the grid on it and light coming through the door from Dan. And then here's our kind of full cast and crew shot as well. So we've got obviously Chelsea in the bath, we've got Joe here, we've got Dan and Marie from Circle Vintage. This is Fiona. Very kindly let us use her bathroom. And this is Eva, who you might remember from the car shoot, who is the partner of Joe over here. So huge fun, great crew to work with, amazing location, really kind of pushing me to my limits of, like I said, kind of turn up and I've got, okay, these amazing set of ingredients, can I create something interesting out of it? And so there was a lot of fun, a lot of pressure, but a lot of creativity came out of that shoot. So just kind of closing down some of these windows here. So that's really what I wanted to show you, and to hopefully it gives you an idea, a sense of, you know, how I sort of set about playing with the lights and played with the ingredients. It would be interesting to know what somebody else would do with exactly the same ingredients, because guaranteed they would come up with a different mix of photos, and that's part of what I love about photography. The more you develop your photography, the more photography you do, the more you start to develop your own authentic voice as such. Is what appeals to you, what are the decisions, because there's 10,000 little decisions you're going to make about where you move the lights, about the angles you're going to use, quite apart from the bigger decisions like what camera lenses you're going to use or what camera you've got, but where you're going to sit, what are you going to be slightly higher, are you going to be slightly lower, are you going to move the lights left or right, what lights are you going to use, are you going to diffuse the lights, are you going to have hard lights and soft lights. All these kind of things can have a profound effect on how the photos turn out. So those were how my ones turned out, and a great deal of fun it was too. So thank you ever so much to Marie and Dan for developing the idea, collaborating together with that. Thank you to Fiona for allowing us to use her amazing bathroom, and thank you also to Chelsea and Joe for being such wonderful models. So you've got a few more comments here, so let's go back and see what we've got here. But Mai-Britt says, impressive, you can be creative on command. That wouldn't work for me. Yeah, it is one of those things, and occasionally I absolutely kick myself for it, the idea that I have set myself up specifically to be creative on command. Now the thing is, what you have to understand with that is you can't always be super top A-game creative. What you have to be at the very least is competent. You have to know that there's a minimum level of creativity that you can achieve, that even on a bad day, you have to be able to produce something which is going to satisfy or ideally delight your client. And that's a really important bit. You have to develop your skills with the camera, your skills with lighting, and your skills with your creativity to the point whereby you know you can deliver a minimum level. Then, if it's not a bad day, with luck, you can deliver above that. And that's ultimately where it becomes much more interesting. That's where the challenge is as a photographer. Our creativity, what we're looking for is to always kind of stretch ourselves, extend ourselves, to go beyond what we thought we were capable of doing. And every now and again, we get a photo out of it. And now maybe not every single photo in the sequence is going to be that, but maybe we're going to get one good photo that we particularly love. We're going to get some other photos which we're really pleased with, and hopefully all the photos are going to be ones that the client is going to be particularly pleased with. So yeah, but it's a lot of, I was actually having this conversation with my wife Maggie the other day, or just like the other week, about this. Is one of the differences between her art, as a creative artist who, is that she creates at her own pace, in her own, and if she's got a day where she can't get her head into it, she just doesn't create that day. But for me, I kind of, because it is a kind of create on demand, there's levels whereby there's times when I have to do that, but then there's always this pressure, even if you don't feel like creating, I mean, when Maggie can be at a place where she's got an exhibition coming up, or she's got to deliver pictures, and so something's got to be finished. Well, we all know that kind of time pressure that can kind of force creativity. How many of us did our homework on the bus going to school? Sometimes it's the night before, when we have absolutely no choice, that the brain becomes most focused. And I think it's really that bit. It's that bit whereby you have no choice. Your brain has to do it. You have to deliver. And it's amazing then what you sometimes can deliver. And I think really, to go back to this kind of creativity on demand bit, it's I throw myself into these situations, and I find myself in this situation. I have these models, and I have these outfits, and I have this, and I have this client, and I have these expectations, and now I have to deliver, and I have no choice in the matter. And somewhere along the line, the brain goes, okay, we do it. And very often it's fueled by an extra cup of coffee, an extra cup of very strong coffee, but so far so good. It does deliver, and it's exciting, terrifying, but also exciting, exhilarating, and that is where the thrill of this kind of photography comes in for me. Right, okay, what else have we got here? Pat says Woody is doing a jig. Yeah, we got the mannequins dancing today. Why not? Mai-Britt says beautiful bathroom. Viji says looks like a drawing room. Yeah, it does. It's kind of got, because of all the paintings that she's got on the wall and the art. It does have that, except for the fact that you wouldn't normally have a bath in the middle of your drawing room. Oh, for most of us at any rate. Meg says, I really like the gold boots. Great shot. Thank you. Viji says, helmet and boots. April says, yes, what is going on? Where is this bathroom? It does not seem to be real with the carpet. Very unique, I must say. Yeah, it really was an amazing place. Mai-Britt says, love the photo of the girl in the bath drinking the wine. Yes, that kind of feels like the ultimate indulgence, doesn't it? Pat says, hope the carpet didn't get drenched. No, it didn't. Everybody was extraordinary. When you know there's a carpet underneath the bath rather than just tiles, it's amazing just how careful you can be with making sure you sit down very, very carefully. You make sure, certainly when getting dried off, towels are put down to stand on, and you're very carefully rinsing yourself, or not rinsing, you're kind of squeezing everything out, so you're dripping minimally before you actually get out of the bath. Viji says, from 3D to 2D, what starts as 3D image of a girl sitting sipping wine, the lower half is like a two-dimensional image, the kind of melted look. Yeah, again, it's that distortion that you get with the wide angle lens. I do love the wide, really kind of stretching it out with the wide angle lens, because it does take us into this idea of this otherworldly, slightly surreal place of being, a place of dreams rather than, yeah, I think that's it really. It's that kind of a dreamscape in a way, rather than a representation of reality. When you see everything distorted like that, then you feel like you've been propelled into another world, an alternate world. And so somehow the idea of these glitter boots, spaceman, bride, bath vibe become more acceptable because you leap into this other world. You're not comparing it quite so much to our normal everyday reality. What else have we got here? Oh, Maggie says lovely distortion of the length of her legs. Yeah, well, especially that kind of that portrait version one. Meg says, what was the smell of the bath? Well, actually, we didn't have any smelly bath salts in it. It was just straightforward water. So no smelling, fancy smelly stuff there, Meg. Mai-Britt says, interesting photos. You really do wonder what's going on. Pat says, you were very blessed with such a patient Chelsea with wet bottom. Chelsea's brilliant. She's absolutely up for pretty much anything. She's a fantastic model. She really is great. She's an actress and a performer, comedian as well. So she's used to performing, which is fantastic for me as a photographer. Is here's somebody who's not frightened to perform in front of the camera. Makes a huge amount of difference from my side of things. Jackie says, great decorative backgrounds. Rosemary says, you managed to capture many different moods with your style rather than being stuck in a single mindset. Yeah, and again, it's that notion of when you're working with different people as well, you're collaborating. It's not just about me. It's about all the ideas that are coming from other people. So it's coming from Marie, it's coming from Dan, it's coming from the situation, but it's also coming from Chelsea, and it's coming from Joe, and how they might tilt their head or move or suggest something. Because on a photo set, I'm always trying to stress the point that I'm absolutely open to suggestions and ideas. This isn't just about me coming in and imposing my ideas. I see these things as collaborations, that when we work together, new forms, new ideas come forward, and together we create something way bigger than we could have ever done on our own. Maggie says, the combination of Chelsea with the woman in the painting. Love it. Oh, yes, is that the one where she's in the... I was forgetting about that one, actually. Yes, if we kind of flip back to here, this particular one where Chelsea, you look here, but then there is this woman in the painting above as well with a not dissimilar kind of... heads going in a completely different direction, but the mood does have a kind of an echo there as well. I would love to say that I planned that one, but unfortunately I do have to say it was completely coincidental. Robert says, great shoot, Kim, thank you. And April says, I think my favourite is the one with Chelsea folded her arms on the tub looking into the side. Very vintage looking. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the feedback. I hope you found that interesting. So just a quick reminder, if you are finding these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them in any way, then go to buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres. It's one of the places you can contribute. Well, the other thing to do, of course, if you've not already done it, do subscribe. Somewhere down here in below here, there's an option to subscribe, and make sure you click the little notifications bell so that you know when new videos are appearing as well. So, right, okay, what we're going to do now is, a couple of things, just before I get to the critique section. First thing I want to say is a quick congratulations to Robert and Anne in Texas, who recently put some photos in for the Texas State Fair. I remember chatting with them last year before they put some photos in, and they both managed to receive honourable mentions with our entries. So congratulations to both of you, Robert and Anne. Good stuff. Now, what have we got? Oh, I did do a question of the week. I decided this week was going to be bath or shower, hot or cold, just to kind of see what the general reactions would be. We're fortunate in our house that I've lived in houses where there's only been a bath. I've lived in houses where there's only been a shower, and of course, we're very fortunate in the fact that we have both options here, and which means that sometimes you fancy a bath, sometimes you fancy a shower. But I thought, generally speaking, you tend to find most people have a preference for one or the other. And then likewise, whilst a hot bath is ideal for some people, others prefer a cold shower. So I thought I'd ask for the hot or cold too. And not many people actually really joined in, but if we had a handful of answers. David said bath, hot. Nikki said she wanted to go for a bath. Jackie said shower for sure. It's much quicker and very hot in the winter, cooler in the summer. Pat said there's nothing like a fragrant soak and hot bath, but I'm restricted to hot showers at the present. Roy said when my late wife became wheelchair bound, we had to get rid of the bath and install a walk-in shower. I must say I now prefer a shower for all the reasons mentioned by Jackie. And John says shower, hot or cold, depends on the weather. Oh, a couple more comments here. So Viji was noted, commenting on the fact that Maggie had spotted the picture above Chelsea in the bath. Said, an artist always, you spotted the similarity. April says, yay, congrats to Rob and Anne. Oh, Jack's joined us and says, hi everyone. And VG says, congrats also to Robert and Anne. Robert says, thank you, but Anne had first place as well. Ah, right. Oh, excellent. Oh, and she's never let me forget it. Right, well, maybe we need to start having some specific critique sections for you then, Robert. Right, okay, so, superb. What we're going to do now is we're going to go move on to the critique section. So I've had 4 people send in images for critique. Now, I will also say, actually, I will say just at this point that I'll give a quick heads up that next week there won't be a podcast. The next podcast is going to be in 2 weeks' time on which I think is the 11th of September. Maggie and I have managed to get a weekend away. We're going to be heading off over to Northumbria, where we're just going to spend a couple of days walking on beaches, sitting in cafes, drinking coffee, eating ice cream, talking, sleeping and eating. So that's what we've got lined up for next weekend. So we will be coming back on the Sunday, but won't be back until late Sunday afternoon, so there won't be time to do a podcast. But what I am also going to do for 2 weeks' time is I'm going to set a bathroom challenge as well. Now, that doesn't matter. I'm not expecting everybody here to have fancy bathrooms with baths in the middle of their floor. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a photo of the bathroom itself. This is an opportunity to maybe look for still life options. What can you do with a toothbrush or a razor and a bit of soap, or a line of perfumes or scented candles or bubble bath or shower gel? Also, don't forget, there's the idea of a lot of bathrooms, as well as having mirrors, also tend to have interesting reflective surfaces in taps and faucets and plugs. And so I think there's a real opportunity to explore the bathroom, whether you want to go still life or you want to go abstract or you want to go macro. I think there's a lot of fun to be had. So I'm setting a bathroom challenge for 2 weeks' time. So 2 weeks should give you plenty of time to do it. So I will talk again about this at the end of the podcast. I'll give you a reminder, as well as reminding you again about the fact that that there won't be one for next week. Right. Oh, April says, enjoy your time. Thank you. I'm sure we will. Viji says, congrats, Anne. And Pat says, have a lovely break with Maggie. We're really looking forward to it. Thank you. So, on to then the critique section. So let's say we've got 4 people who sent in images for critique. So the critique section is your chance to get feedback on your photos. There are very few places on the internet where you can get genuine feedback on your images. When we put we create our photos, but we're very often very close to them. We quite often don't see aspects to them that other people might notice. We're kind of because when we take a photo, we remember everything else that was going on around that photo. When somebody else looks at the photo, they're only seeing the image. They don't have all the background noises, the smells, the sights, the sounds, all the thoughts, all the other photos that were taken at the same time, which you maybe decided not to use. Other people view images very differently to the way we view them. So we can't always be sure that they are being seen in the way that we intended. Or sometimes we're trying to take a photo and we just get stuck and we're not sure what to do. Now, we can put our photos up on social media, but the feedback we generally get tends to be very nice from our friends. We get likes, or we don't get any feedback at all. If somebody likes it, they'll click like, they might even say like, or they might even say like even if they don't particularly like it, but they're just being supportive, because that's what friends do, which is lovely, but it doesn't help us develop our photography. So this corner of the internet, the critique feedback section of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, is your chance to send me your images, and I will give you as genuine good feedback as I can to help you advance your photography. So if you want to take part in any of the critique sections, either join the Facebook group, which is also called Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. If you're on Facebook, go there, type that into the search engine. You'll find it there. It's a public group you can join, and then put the image in, or email me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. My website, if anybody's ever interested in going and checking out my website, getting a bit more background on me, kimayres.co.uk, and my email is kim@kimayres.co.uk. So go check that out, or email me there. And either way, if you're submitting an image, let me know what it is you're struggling with. Let me know what your sticking point is, and I will do my best to help. Right, okay. What have we got? Oh, Don says, are you coming to Lindisfarne? Not sure whether we'll be as high up as Lindisfarne. We're kind of down at the lower end. We were going to be getting up at maybe towards Alnwick and Amble. Amble in particular has got a fantastic cafe. I don't know whether you've ever been there. Cafe and ice cream shop, Don, called Spirelli's. Does the most amazing ice cream and fantastic coffee, and we end up kind of continually going back there. But yeah, we have been up to Lindisfarne a couple of times, and an amazing place. It has a coastal road for anybody who's not been there, so part of the time the tide comes in and the island is completely cut off from the outside world. And then when the tide goes out, then you can get in and out across the road. And that periodically somebody doesn't check the tidal times and their car gets stuck and washed off the road and stuck in the mud and sands. Right, so images then. So yeah, here we go. Critique then. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start with Russ. So a little while ago, what happened was Russ sent me this photo last year. He said, hi everyone, some time ago I submitted a photo for critique that is one of my favourites, but never does very well on the crowd voting sites. This photo was taken at a friend's stable and is of my dog meeting his horse for the first time. And part of Kim's, he goes on to say, part of Kim's feedback was about the gap between the horse and the dog being too large. And I do remember this because one of the things I talked about here was that when you have essentially two subjects, we've got the horse up here and we've got the dog down here, and the eye has to sort of jump too much, it kind of slows us down. What we need to have is something which kind of where our eye gets drawn in, and we kind of to really help the story. It helps if there's not so much of a gap, because in photography gaps become really exaggerated. And whereas if you were standing in reality, if you were looking at the whole barn here, the entire scene, the gap between horse and dog would have seemed very small indeed. But because the top of the image is cut just above the horse's ears and the bottom just below the dog's legs, this gap here is taking up something like between a quarter and a third of the entire length of the photo. So what I did at the time was I cropped out the middle, closed the gap between it to say that there should be less gap. There was also the fact that on crowd voting sites like PhotoCrowd, ViewBug, Guru Shots, where people are looking at a lot of images very quickly, one of the things you also find is that portrait never does as well as landscape. Landscape photos nearly always score higher than portrait photos. And I remember going off and doing a whole thing talking at great length and showing examples of photos and top 20 photos of various competitions, and how you find that they're nearly always either landscape or square. They're virtually, you might very, very occasionally get one that's portrait, but that'll be like 1 in 20 and only 1 every 5 or 6 competitions where that happens. So with that in mind, Russ goes on. So part of Kim's feedback about the gap being to also mentioning that portrait images rarely do well as landscape. So with this in mind, I attempted to address both of these points, and so he re-edited it and created this. So what he's done is he's taken out the middle, he's created a much closer image, and I feel that this works a lot better. Having the horse and the dog now feel really almost nose to nose, and you get such a sense of intimacy. That gap, rather than being a quarter to a third of the whole picture, is now reduced to about 10% of the picture. But what Russ has also done, though, is he has created it into a landscape format. Now, what I would say here, though, is where I think the problem here is that it might be in a landscape format, but the whole story is happening over on the left, and there's virtually nothing here happening over on the right. And so that kind of makes the right side feel redundant. But at the same time, you weren't necessarily wanting to go back to the idea of having it completely portrait. So there's two things I'm going to potentially suggest here. One is the idea of, rather than worrying necessarily about portrait, is to go square. So if I drag this across and I make that, 1366 by 1370, they're close enough. So I think if you do that, then we now have, sorry, I just changed that there. We now have that. And I think as a square, that works really well. And I think you can get away with, I think the square is probably good enough to, rather than having to go landscape and create an extra empty part, which just kind of doesn't quite feel right. Now, so that's one suggestion, is go square, and I think that works. Another option is that you need to have something else in the space. So let's just pull that back out a bit here. Because all this kind of feels slightly empty, you could almost, now if you had somebody standing here, or if you'd had some piece of equipment even now, or at the very least, and this isn't going to work perfectly, I can see at the back here we've got like a feeding bucket of some kind. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show, if I copy that and paste it and then drag it over here. Of course, if it was here, it would then be larger because it would be in the foreground. So I'm just going to enlarge that and let's enter that, and then I will mask it and just paint out. So that needs to be at 100%. Kind of paint out the edges a little bit, and then we need to pull that down just so it kind of lines up somewhere over here. Now, again, absolutely not perfect, but starts to give you a sense of something else coming in. I still feel we've got a bit of a gap up here, and if there was something hanging off the wall, you know, some nice piece of farm equipment, a scythe, a fork, a hoe, a spade, or even like a bit of a saddle or a horse collar or stirrups or something sitting on that bit of wall, I think that would have then really made the difference. And then that would have just kind of filled in that space, given something extra to look at after we've noticed this. But without something over here, it does kind of feel just a bit too much. I've got space for the sake of having space, so it doesn't really feel quite as balanced. But bearing in mind that you know all the action is happening on the left-hand side, I think the other option, if you haven't got anything you can put in there, then I think square is probably the best option for you there. So thanks very much for sending that one in, Russ. I hope that I've managed to give you a couple of ideas there. So a couple of extra comments here. Rosemary says, "Oh, I remember this photo," which is a high compliment if someone remembers an image. This is true. We see so many all the time. If you actually remember them, you're doing pretty well, especially a year later. I love the painterly feel, the interaction, and the black and white conversion. April says, "Love it." And Robert says, "Lovely edit." Rosemary says, "Getting the gap did accomplish one thing. The gap did accomplish was the reinforcement of the size difference between the tiny dog and the large horse. This is true. So I think for that reason, I prefer the original." Okay. I do need to be working on closing the gaps myself, though. That's fair enough. Roy says the horse now seems to have very short legs. Yep, another one. I mean, it kind of depends. I mean, if the horse had its head leaning over much further, that could have worked. But maybe it's a pony. Or maybe I have to accept the fact that I'm wrong. If everybody else thinks now, it just makes it look like you've got a short horse. Fair enough. John says, "I like the angle of the horse-dog shot. Making it square really helps." And April's also saying about it. She's noticing the size difference. And Don says, "Oh yes, went there for my birthday." Oh, that'd be to Sporelli's. Yes. Yes, if I live nearby, we will be going there for my birthday very often as well, I think. Right, okay. So let's move on then. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to Viji. And Viji said, Viji sent in some pictures of some peacock feathers. And so she sent 3. So which one will appeal to the viewer? Is there any other view that can show these peacock feathers in a better light? So here was one. Here was another one. And here was another one. And she said, "If there are some there are plenty of there are some peacocks that roam around near our restaurant, Sun Griller. I got these feathers from there." So great, you've got peacocks nearby, you can get hold of peacock feathers. So there's a couple of different things. I mean, this one I quite like the arrangement, I have to say. There's something quite nice about the you kind of end up with this sort of 3. An odd number always tends to work better than an even number, so that works well. What we do have here, though, is very, very portrait. This is a typical kind of phone shot, and That very long kind of thing might work fine on a phone. I think if you were to be putting into the crowd voting sites, you would find it much. These probably wouldn't do quite so well, because remember I was saying about landscape works better than portrait. But there's another thing here, which is about the level of detail here. Not quite so bad on this one, although it goes slightly out of. I'm not sure how sharp that is in the focus. But certainly when we come here, what I can see is you're trying to play with the macro. And part of it's working, except part of it isn't. Again, the detail isn't really there. It goes out of focus very quickly. Now, Viji and I were chatting the other day specifically about the problem of when you've got something like a peacock feather, this idea of getting in really close is really tempting. That's what you kind of, well, there's two ways. You can either go about arranging the feathers like this, finding an interesting arrangement, or you can get in close. And because the colours are amazing, the fronds, the individual strands of the feather are really amazing, and you kind of want to get in and you want to go macro with it. But what do you do if you don't have a macro lens? Now, some cameras or phone cameras do have macro lenses, and you're using your phone on this, so that gives you a chance. But you still need to make sure you've got plenty of light. That's the other thing, to make sure that that the camera's auto settings are going to be able to cope with this. So don't try and do this indoors under light. You will need to be outdoors, if not in direct sunlight. It may be in the shade, but on a sunny day, be in the shade, and then you'll still have plenty of light. And that's really, if you're going to use your phone, use that setup. But then there's the idea of what can you do if you want to play around a little bit more? And one of the things I was then reminded of, and I talked about this again well over a year ago, was about the idea, I think, of using magnifying glasses. So let me just show you this photo. This is a photo I took of some pine cones. Here's a photo of pine cones. And what I did was, this was before I got my macro lens. This was early on in lockdown. And so you can see here, so I've used my phone to take a photo of the camera. And you can see that what I'm doing is I've got the pine cones the other side of a magnifying glass. And this is the view that you can see through the back there. So, cheap magnifying glass, okay? So I put that up to there, and voila, suddenly, we've got an even bigger head than I usually have. So you can place this in front of the lens of your camera, and instantly you end up with a slightly more zoomed in. Another thing is, and I know I've shown this a couple before, is you can get these kind of little jewelers magnifying glasses, or map reading ones, and these are really, really powerful. You can kind of stick them in your eye, and then you can look at things incredibly close up, the very little depth of field with that. But on a camera, I've got a tiny little camera here on the webcam, which isn't much bigger than a telephone one. But if I put this over here like that, it massively exaggerates. And kind of come in, not quite sure what you can see there because I can't look at it at the same time. But what you can do is you can put this over your phone. So you get your phone and you've got your little lens there, and you can put that over that like that, and that can then give you a real exaggerated. And I've got a photo somewhere. In fact, yes, I did. I took a photo. It was taken a couple of years ago of my granddaughter doing precisely that. So here's a photo of me using a magnifying glass, of my granddaughter using a magnifying glass. I love the kind of photographing a pine cone. So what we can see here is we've got that sitting over the front of the lens of her phone, and then she's able to get incredible macro detail of the cone itself. But then I'm using my magnifying glass to make that bit appear bigger in the screen as well. So that's what I kind of wanted to say there. I think peacock feathers are an amazing thing. You get hold of them. But if you really want to get into macro and you either can't afford, don't have access to, or it's on your wish list, but it will be several months yet before you can get hold of a macro lens, then magnifying glasses. And you can buy them really quite cheaply. Just go I mean, you can even get toy ones. Go to a local toy store or whatever. You can buy little packs, sets of different magnifying glasses. Some of you might even have your kids or grandchildren might even have like a science set kicking about, and you quite often got little magnifying glasses in science sets as well. So they're fun things, and never underestimate just how much fun you can have with your camera on one of these, or one of these little ones as well. So there you go, nice bit of advice to play around with that. Get your magnifying glasses going. Right. What else we got here? Oh, April says, neat idea. Makes those beautiful colours of the feathers of the peacock. And Viji says, lovely idea, Kim. Thank you for the ideas. Excellent. Okay, right, so let's move on then. So John sent in a landscape. So let me just find John's landscape. And John said, a landscape I took a couple of weeks ago from the door of my hotel room. A lovely, nice kind of country hotel in Holmes Country, Ohio, late afternoon. One of many similar shots. Exposure and contrast bumped slightly, dehaze and texture applied as well. Taken with a Nikon Z6, putting in for critique. So what we've got here then is a lovely green summer country view of Ohio. And looking for a bit of feedback and critique. Okay, so absolutely understand. You sort of come out the front of the hotel front door, you see this view, you're going to take a photo, or by the sound of it, take lots of photos. And then this is the one that you decided that you like and you kind of want to put into critique. Now, the version you sent me is particular. I don't know if Facebook's just cropped it or made it particularly small. It does feel... a larger version would allow me to sort of show you perhaps a couple more things you could do. Because really what I want to do with this, John, is I want to crop in. Because as it stands, when we look at it as a kind of a large photo, and let me just kind of zoom in a little bit like this, just to kind of fill the screen. What's happening is it's large, but there's nothing really for us to immediately place our eye on. It's sort of broad green hills, a lot of sky. There is also the feeling, now you may well tell me the horizon that the hills do run down from right to left in that way, but I look at it and I kind of feel like it needs to be straightened slightly. But there is detail, there is interesting stuff here, but I think it's swamped and it's getting missed. Because if you think about it, 40% of your picture is taken up with this bit of field in the foreground. And then a good 30% of your picture is taken up with this sky, which, whilst it's got clouds in there, they're not the most interesting or dramatic of cloud formations. And then we've got another kind of 10%, 15% of your picture is taken up with this tree over here. But yet what I would say is where the actual action is happening, which is where the hills are kind of going into each other and you've got buildings and you've got cattle and there's everything, it's just happening in this tiny little strip here, which is only taking up about 10-15% max of your entire picture. And actually, this is kind of where the story is, I think. So now, let's just open that in Photoshop, just kind of give you a slightly better answer. Close that one from Russ. And to sort of zoom in a bit, so okay, what's the best? The place here is kind of a difficult one, like I say, because there isn't a lot to play with in the first place. But you will have the original. You'll have the original file size, so you'll know what you're capable of doing. But actually, like I say, it's kind of here where the action is happening. So now I've cropped that, let's zoom in a bit more. Again, there still feels like there's a lot of field in the foreground. So I think I really want to kind of crop in more. I see this bit of barn here, which I really like. There's that little splash of red on that barn. We really don't need much sky. We only need enough sky to see what's going on. Maybe we tilt that a little bit, create a slightly straighter horizon. But then we don't need so much there. We don't need so much there. Now this foreground is kind of coming up a bit, and I find, for my money, now it ends up being a little bit panoramic, but in essence, this is where your photo is. Now, because it's a small one that's come through from Facebook, we've not got the detail in here, but you would have if you've got the original. But also perhaps kind of, rather than you've used your 24mm as a wider angle, but actually kind of coming in a bit closer. Where's the story? This is the bit, where's the story, where's the action? And here, when we kind of zoom in at this level, we can now see the barn, we've got these other buildings, we've got the cattle in the field, and we've got that kind of lovely crisscross where we've got this hedge bit is kind of sloping down to the left, we've got this bit sloping down to the right, we've got this sloping down to the left, we've got all these kind of interacting diagonals kind of coming in, the gentle flow, the very gentle kind of hills, with the buildings dotted amongst them and the trees dotted amongst them and the cattle dotted amongst them. And I think for really, this comes back down to what we're saying is, where's the story? Okay, John? And the story here is in this part. So when it comes to taking the photo, because you're so far away from it, you've either got to crop in a lot, in which case you're losing a lot of the stuff, and even with the original photo, you're not going to have as much detail as you could have, or you try and get closer to it. So if we go back to your original photo here, cross the field, or maybe the problem is that goes down a little bit, I think. So by the time you get to here, you're not really going to see quite so much. It's a tricky one. Maybe you need to be upstairs, if there's an upstairs in the hotel, looking out this way, a little bit more height, catch a little bit more of that barn. Oh, you see, you've got that lovely little splash of red there on the barn. I kind of feel like it'd be quite interesting to see a little bit more, of that barn. And for that, you need to be slightly higher up, so you're kind of looking over that hedge a little bit more. So again, it's that thing of you're in the landscape. How do you make the most of the landscape? You say, where's the story? What's the most important part of this photo? And is that bit being swamped by too much sky or too much field? You maybe want to have a lot of sky. If the sky is really dramatic, then the photo becomes about the sky in the landscape. But this sky isn't dramatic enough for that. Or is there something really interesting in the foreground of the field? I mean, if you had some rabbits or hares running across the field in the foreground, or there was some really interesting marks cut into it, or there was somebody even sitting on one of those kind of little kind of tractor mower things, then you've got to kind of focus down here. But without that, this is just kind of taking up space, making us wonder where the story is. So I hope that gives you a little bit of feedback, John. I hope that gives you a few ideas. It's about understanding if your story is really about the hills and the way then you need to be closer in so we can see them, and not having it diluted by the field in the foreground and the sky at the top. So hopefully then that gives you a couple of ideas, and depending on what other photos you've got from that set, you might be able to find something in there. Okay, a couple of comments here. April says she'd like to catch more of that barn. Viji says, so peaceful to look at. April says, I love the view and I can smell it. April says, I would love to go down to... I'd love to see this photo when the sun's going down. Well, that's another thing. When you've got those kind of shapes of the hills, when the sun is low, you're really going to get the shadows, and you're really going to get that sense of depth that happens. But of course, we're not always there at the right time. But even a daylight photo, getting that greens and blues can work, but it's a case of knowing where you're at. And then John says, thanks, I now have some ideas of what other photos might be better. I will send you one. Excellent. I'd look forward to seeing that. Superb. Okay, thank you very much for sending that one in, John. Right, one more to go then, and this is Mai-Britt. And so Mai-Britt sent in, where are we? I'm just going to boom, boom, boom. Oh no, actually, let's cancel that, and that's the photo I'm looking for. So Mai-Britt sent in this one, and she says, I put in this one for the critique section. I passed this beautiful young lady when I was out looking for some street ideas, and I then walked back and asked her if I could take her photo. Very unlike me. No, that's really good to actually have the courage to turn around and say, is it okay if I take your photo? Worst that's going to happen is they turn around, they give you a slightly funny look and say no, and then you're forgotten about 2 minutes later. But I understand that it can sometimes be a bit tricky to do that. So kudos, smoke points to you for actually having the bravery to go ahead and actually do that. Anyway, she says, but I was very surprised to see her in that part of the city because she was Gucci all over, and I would expect her to be in a more posh part of the more posh place. But then again, Copenhagen Food Festival was just round the corner, and I suppose she was sitting waiting for someone. I'll forward the original to you. I like the photo myself, but would like to hear how I can crop it to keep or tell the story. I decided that the best way of doing this was black and white. Do you agree? Okay, well, first of all, to address the notion of black and white gives us sort of... Now, let's do the comparison. Let's show everybody else what the... So, having sent me the original, this is what the colour version is like, and the colour version does have a different feel to it than the black and white. Now I can see you've edited that. It's not just a case of convert to black and white, you've highlighted a couple of things and toned down a couple of other bits. So you've said about editing it, bring out a little bit more texture and clarity, I think, with the edit. The black and white gives it a more timeless feel. This could be, well, other than the site, it says review us on TripAdvisor. I was going to say, could be any time over the last 50 years. Other things give away the fact that it isn't, like the TripAdvisor or the style of the push bike in the background or anything like that. But it does have a slightly more timeless quality. Colour puts us into the now. That says this is, colour makes us feel that we are seeing a reality of some form. A black and white creates a slight abstracted version, which tells us we're looking at a story, we're looking at a sort of slightly difference in time. But let's go back then. So are there any other ways that you could have cropped it and in order to maintain the story? Now, what this comes down to, Mai-Britt, is which story you're trying to tell, because ultimately there are several stories you can tell here. So let me let's go to Photoshop. I'll just close John's one there, and let's open this in Photoshop so we can start playing around a little bit with different crops. So first of all, just this general crop. First of all, what I would say is that there always feels to me like there's not quite enough. You've got quite a bit of room above her head, but virtually no room below her feet. And I kind of feel like you could probably crop down a little bit from the top, and you could probably have gone slightly a little bit more under the feet as well. The other thing is that, just as a general rule, you've got her pretty much smack bang in the middle of the photo. And the middle part of the photo, as we've talked before, is quite often the kind of dead zone. That rule of thirds, whilst is a guideline, obviously, rather than a rule, but by and large, I mean, okay, fine if you're looking like the bath shoots that I did, some of those where the Chelsea sitting in the bath dead centre is a really important part of that composition narrative. But when you've got something like this, where the picture is sort of moving down off to the left and we've got a diagonal kind of taking us away, then you kind of want to have a feel, I think an off-centre works better. Now, generally speaking, with off-centre, what we would do, especially because she is looking to the left, so let's just kind of pull that down a little bit, say something like that. Take it. I'm going to use the content aware fill just to kind of give us a little sense here. But what I would also do is you might sort of bring that out a bit. So in reality, what you would have done is just framed this slightly differently. So if you'd framed her along this kind of third point, if I just kind of do that, see what the content aware does. Yeah, so not bad. So what we can see now is she's sitting here and we've got a little bit more space. She's kind of leaning into the space. Now, depending on what else was here, this space is starting to look a little bit empty. We can run into that same problem of that Russ had with that crop. So maybe a little bit depends on what's going on here. But generally speaking, when somebody's facing to the left, you would have more space to the left of them. Might you kind of actually crop it the other way? And that I think becomes interesting, because what we've also got here is if we come in here, again, let's just create a little bit space under here, bring this down a bit. But what happens if we stretch this out to the right? So that rather than having her to the on the right of the picture on the third, we now use the rule of thirds to put her on the left of the picture. Now, what happens here is she's part of that picture, but now this empty chair really becomes almost a dominant part of the photo. And If your narrative is the idea that she is waiting for someone, this now becomes part of that wait. You know, the empty chair then takes on a sense of absence. If you've ever read your Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, he's got I think it's in Being and Nothingness. There's the notion of that a place that absence can still have meaning. That if he goes to a cafe to meet Pierre and Pierre isn't there, his experience of the cafe isn't just of the cafe in itself, it's about the cafe without Pierre in it. There's an absence makes itself felt to his experience of the cafe. And in this case, if we're talking about this kind of photo, then actually what happens is the chair itself becomes part of it. Now, I would say part of the problem then in black and white, this perhaps doesn't work quite so well because she starts to blend into the background a little bit. So if I open this with Photoshop, again, we'll go for the color one, and now we'll do basically the same kind of thing. No, not that. Pull that down a little bit, pull this way, extend this out this way a little bit. Here we go. Now I think we can see her slightly more clearly because her head is contrasting with the background here. We can make out her a lot more easily than we can in this one, I think. And so maybe in colour this one works slightly better. But in either way, what we're talking about here is that the empty chair actually becomes a strong part of the narrative. We see her, we see the chair, we're waiting for somebody to turn up, maybe to come, maybe to return, maybe they've gone off to pay for the coffees or to order something, maybe probably to order something because there isn't actually anything on the table already, rather than pay for what's already been drunk. So that gives you one kind of narrative that's going on. Another narrative is where what we've got here is the reflection behind her head. And if you were to come in close, something like, yeah, let's kind of move in something a little bit like that. And now what the narrative is you've got the woman here and you've got her reflection in the window. That becomes much more prominent. And in this case, I think you've already done it partly with your editing, but essentially we would, you know, highlight, make that stand out a little bit more. I'll just sort of dodge and burn very slightly so that the reflection just grabs us a little bit more. We've got this sort of stray leaf there. I'll just take that out. And now that gives us a slightly different, or quite a different narrative. So the narrative, rather than be about her sitting in the place with the chair and everything else, we're less aware of the surroundings, and it's much more about the look on her face, the fact that actually she looks like she's got her eyes closed behind her sunglasses, and she's resting. She might have just been blinking at that moment, but it gives a narrative. And then the reflection here with the shadows and reflections of the tree in the window, that itself then becomes another narrative. And because we've cropped it like this, we've got the kind of diagonal of her coming up here, but we also have the diagonal of that shadow of that light patch coming down here. So we've got this quite nice triangular part in the middle of the photo. Now, so we've got those are two different kinds of narratives that you can take out of the same picture. Now, the other thing I wanted to say was part of your, where did you say that you were surprised to see her in that part of the city? Now, I don't know that part of the city. I don't know Copenhagen, so I don't really know. But what you were talking about essentially is that you've got this woman, Gucci, expensive, posh outfits, and the fact that she's contrasted by the fact that she's in a sort of slightly more downgraded part of the city. Now, in black and white, again, less noticeable. But when we go to the colour version, over here, we've got graffiti. In fact, let's go back to the original open. And there's another piece of graffiti here as well. And that graffiti is what kind of will give it a sort of slightly more down market feel to it. So in that case, what you might want to do, again, is you come in closer. We're not worried about the chair to the left. We could maybe crop around mid-shin, something like that. nudge that over a little bit. What we wanted to make sure that we keep. Now, just a quick point: when you are cropping somebody's arms or legs, never crop at the joints. I've talked about this before. Might be a while since I've last talked about it, but just as a point, if you crop at the ankle or the elbow or the knee or the wrist, it just tends to look wrong. It looks like something's been chopped off. Whereas if you actually go mid arm, mid calf, or mid shin, or mid thigh, or mid upper arm, you can get away with it much more. So when cropping here, we need to make sure we are definitely that little bit above the ankle, but before we get to the knees, it feels a little bit more comfortable. Now we've got this, something like this. Let me just zoom in a little bit. We're now able to make a little bit more of the fact that we've got the graffiti on the image as well. So what we might do is, again, I will just do a quick dodge and burn slightly to enhance that. So if I fractionally lighten that up, but actually I think the burn is going to do a little bit more here. So I'm just sort of deepening the shadow contrast of both these areas. And actually, perhaps, and I'm doing that. This is going to work better in color than in black and white, because black and white kind of tends to neutralize that. But if we're trying to talk about the contrast, then you can see now I've kind of contrasted those color areas in the background here. Having done that, we've also then still got her reflection in here, so we can still kind of lighten and darken, make a little bit more out of her reflection. But what we can see here now is that the bike, the red part here with the marks on and the graffiti on that stand out a little bit more. And then what you could also do with something like this is almost kind of slightly grungy up the editing a little bit. So again, if I duplicate that, I go to filter, camera raw filter. What I might do is first of all add a little bit of a vignette, just not a lot, but just a little bit, just to kind of pull the edging in so that our attention gets drawn back to here and doesn't shoot off too far to the left. But then if we now, the clarity I'm going to bring the shadows up and the highlights down, just to kind of because the clarity is going to push in the opposite direction, and then kind of just boost the texture a little bit more, and that kind of brings out more in the way of the almost the texture splatters on the window and the cobbles. So it kind of feels slightly grungier with something like that, and so it's sort of exaggerated. You can see that editing effect. And so now, if your story is about posh woman in slightly grungier area, then something like this, I think, is making a bit more difference. So there you go. That gives you essentially 3 different ways of looking at that photo, Mai-Britt. You can either standardly you can go kind of to move her to the left or to the right. If you move her to the left of the picture, then that chair becomes the empty chair becomes much more prominent. You can zoom in, get into the head and the reflection and make a thing about that, or you can kind of crop in that bit closer and try and make more of the feature of those bits where the graffiti are. So each of those gives you a slightly different story. So I hope that helps. Hope that gives you a few ideas. So what have we got here? Right, lovely few comments here. Viji says, lovely photo shoot, looks like a vintage Vogue magazine shot. Pat says, beautiful legs. John says, nice bit of street photography, black and white is better in my view. April says, I like the black and white whole, but the colour one I would crop in at the red item. Roy says, I like the reflection of her face. Mai-Britt says, the absence is absolutely perfect. Also, I like the reflection too. Thank you very much. Great ideas. April says, yes, Kim, the cropped, I like it. I wanted it cropped in close to the red item, and the reflection is very good too. Viji says the crop is good as well. April and Pat says, sacrifice legs for graffiti. Brilliant. Love that. So that then is the end of the critique section. So, rounding up then, to remind you now, what we're talking about is, well, first of all, thank you to Viji, to John, to Mai-Britt, and to Russ for sending in images for critique. The next critique section will be in 3 weeks' time, so if you're wanting to get a photo in for that, make sure you get that in. There will, again, I'm going to I have to limit it to 3, maybe 4, very occasionally 5, depending on what else is going on. But generally speaking, I don't tend to like to do more than about 4 critiques in one go. So, and they do I will be doing a kind of first come, first served. But next week there won't be a podcast. So the next podcast will be on the 11th of September. But the next critique section will then be on the 18th of September. But in 2 weeks' time, for the 11th of September, there is the bathroom challenge. So the bathroom challenge doesn't have to be a photo of your bathroom, although if you happen to have a spectacular bathroom, you've got a giant kind of domed hallway with a gold-plated toilet on a checkered tiled floor, I want to see it, okay? Take a great photo of the bathroom. But it doesn't actually have to be of the bathroom. Most people's bathrooms don't tend to be that interesting a shoot. But bear in mind that the bathroom offers up a lot of opportunity. There's an opportunity for things like still life, whether you want to do hairbrushes, combs, little mirrors, or toothbrushes and toothpaste, or makeup, or a razor and shaving foam. There's lots of potential for these kind of still life. Or there's the notion of the macro, of getting in close to finding little details. There's a notion of reflective surfaces where you can go almost abstract with taps and faucets and plugs. Mirrors usually feature in the bathroom as well, but also that notion of dampness. Generally speaking, if you've had a shower or water's got splashed, you have water droplets, and then you have water droplets on reflective surfaces or ceramic surfaces, and you can get really abstract with that as well. So the bathroom doesn't necessarily have to be an interior shot. It can be, if you've got an interesting bathroom, or you have access to an interesting bathroom. It doesn't necessarily have to be your own bathroom, I should say. If there are places where you can go where there's stately homes nearby, or there's, big fancy houses with amazing bathrooms on show, take your camera, see if you can get a really interesting shot. So you can do interior magazine style shots, look at this bathroom, or you can use it for still life, you can use it for abstract, you can use it for macro. There's lots of opportunities here where you can get really creative, and it's this creative bit that's the bit that I want you to think about. And you have 2 weeks to do it. So if you don't get a chance during this week, next weekend is your chance to really go for it. So the week after, I want to see you submitting your photos. Get them in at the beginning of the week, and hopefully we can then, in 2 weeks' time, have a look through what everybody else has done as well as yourself, and we can become inspired by just what you can shoot maybe in your own house, how you can find creativity in what is, generally speaking, thought of as one of the most mundane rooms of the house. It tends to be, it's the functional place. We don't tend to think of it as necessarily a place of great, interesting photos, but I think the possibility is there. So that's that for that. So finally, last couple of comments here. Viji says, dreading the challenge this time. Like I say, Viji, if your bathroom isn't that interesting, think of go still life. Get Suresh's razor and soap, or just, or I think I said before, if he's going to be patient for you and you could do it, you could even get him where he's all kind of frothed up with a razor blade kind of going, cutting through the foam as he's in the middle of a shave. Whether he'll be that patient for you, I don't know. But there's possibilities of ways of playing. And something like that you could even do outside. Like I said, it doesn't have to be bathroom. It's more the kind of bathroom-themed idea. Right, okay. And we've got quite a few people saying thank you and good night and good afternoon and what have you. So thank you ever so much to everybody who sent in the images. Thank you, too, for everybody who's turned up and left comments and give me interaction, and look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you respond to this challenge. Have fun, take care, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Cheerio.